Welcome to the Impact Room, brought to you by Douglas Jackson, who help you hire more impactful, diverse leaders who stay for longer and are more successful. The Impact Room is a business, CX, and leadership podcast where exceptional, diverse, and impactful leadership and wisdom is shared. We dive deep into pressing topics that impact your customer-led business, featuring interviews with CEOs, COOs, Chief Customer, Chief People Officers, directors, influential leaders, and subject matter experts who share their lived experiences, top tips, thoughts, advice, and industry trends to help elevate existing and future talent. So let's dive into our next episode, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, or share if you enjoy this content. Thank you. Great. So, hello, I'm Michelle Ansell, Managing Partner from Douglas Jackson, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Caroline Winwood, a Global Director of Customer Experience, who has worked for some of the leading global consumer brands, including Dyson and Pepsi. Caroline is both a commercial customer-centric leader who drives customer experience, but underpinned by sales and profit generation. Caroline has a wealth of experience and achievements in many aspects of the customer journey: sales, customer service, repair, digital experience, e-commerce, and product development in high growth and mature environments, in both an operational, leadership, and cultural transformation capacity. So Caroline, hello, and lovely to have you here with me today.
Thank you, Michelle. Wow, what an introduction.
Well, there's so much to fit in, isn't there? And I'm sure I've not covered half of it, but hopefully we'll learn a lot more now. So when we spoke, you talked me through some of the customer-centric transformation you'd been a part of. And certainly, you know, in these large global organizations, many of them can struggle with legacy systems and products. What are your key foundations for success when you look to these environments, Caroline?
Oh, it's such a good question. And you hear so often of transformation programs failing. You know, they're too big, they're too cumbersome, budgets get cut in year, leadership changes, all of those things. So it takes quite a lot of thinking about. Where I'd always start is by saying, understand the transformation that you're leading. How does that align and deliver upon the business's commercial plan? You know, so if a chief exec is standing up and saying, we're going to go from X to Y, as a transformational leader, you need to say, okay, and I'm going to unlock these things that unlock capability that enable you to do that. And that does two things for you. It gives you a real clear sense of alignment with the business, aligns you to the C-suite, gets you that sponsorship, most important sponsorship that you need. But also gives you a vehicle for bringing people with you on that journey and empowering them to push this transformation agenda forward. That's always my number one. My second golden rule is that experience has to be by design. And that design is about what I call the customer visual, but it's also about the operation. And those two things are underpinned normally by a system and a process. And quite often, again, you'll sort of read papers and see examples of where things fail because IT have gone in one way, building what they think is an experience, and a visual creator, web designer has built something else, and then the processes are not even in the room, and the whole thing doesn't actually come together cohesively. So taking that leadership mandate and that strategic vision and bringing all parties together to create that experience by design for everybody within the organization is really critical. And that design has to adhere to some core principles. And normally those core principles, I'd say, would fall into 3 or 4 areas. So customer outcomes. We need to shorten this process by 5 days to 2 days, by 20 clicks to 2 clicks. You know, what are your customer outcomes that you're looking to deliver? What are your financial outcomes that you're looking to deliver? And then finally, what are your future transformation or principles that you're looking to deliver. So you might be starting with one market, but looking to go to 20. Well, the cost of the 20th market cannot be 10 times the cost of your first. You need to understand that whole spectrum, I'd say, and create those principles. And what principles do is they empower your teams as they then create that design, because transformational programs, they're complex, they're multifaceted. There's lots of people making decisions that are quite low level. And if everybody's got a set of principles to adhere back to, then you're much more likely to stay aligned and for your governance to be manageable as well as you go through the process. Talked very briefly there about how transformational programs can be big and cumbersome and fail. I think there's a real skill in balancing the day-to-day operational with the long-term strategic. And so you have to quite quickly, I think, be able to show when and where part of your transformation will land and where you'll start to meet the benefits, as well as demonstrating the full program. And within that as well, face up to the things that you can't do, as well as the things that you can. Have that authentic conversation. Data from day one, really important. Oh my word, how many times do you hear a transformational leader say, crikey, I came in too late and they hadn't built the place where the data was going to be captured, or the reporting tool for the data, or we didn't understand that that field wasn't aligned to the 10 fields behind it. Things like the data from day one, absolute golden rule. And then my final one is about, I talk about nurturing the process and the actual bringing to life of the transformation. You've got to celebrate the big things and the little things, and also give time within your budget and your planning for the actual transformation to land.
Right.
Okay. You know, you won't see, very rarely will you see results day one, because everybody's getting used to something new, you know, and we all do it. No matter what small changes we make in our own lives, having a new laptop, you know, trying out a new supermarket, it takes you time to navigate and find your way around these things. And a business is no different to that. So nurture the transformation process. Those are my overall sort of, global transformation golden rules, I'd say.
Wow. I mean, there's a lot in there, and I'm sure if we went into each element, there'd be a huge amount more. Yeah. As you say, it's hugely complicated. So, I mean, in your experience, where do you think people go wrong in one area more than another, if you just look at those elements that you've highlighted?
I think, I mean, I'm sure there's a million answers to that, depending on what business you've come from. Generally, things fail when the alignment isn't there from the beginning. If you can get everybody together, be going in the right direction, be confident in the pathway that you've created, then, and clear on when things are going to drop and what people are going to get when, you're much more likely to be successful than if you've got disparate teams moving in disparate directions.
Yeah, interesting.
One of my key phrases that may appear old-fashioned actually now, but I'm a real firm believer in, if you can't draw it, you don't understand it. And so quite often when I've got parties together and we're talking about process mapping, experience mapping, and when you sit back and listen, you can sort of start to tell, actually, you're saying something over here about what a system does, and I'm listening to the guys talking about a warehouse. I'm thinking, I'm not sure you're actually talking about the same thing, and that this is going to knit together. And so if you say, actually, guys, just come and draw it for me on the board, then quickly you can capture whether or not they're aligned and understanding. And that's quite a detailed place for a big transformational leader to be in. And I wouldn't advocate that any high level leaders in that detail all the time, but actually to dip in every now and then and just understand for yourself how it works and where the obstacles are can be really, really valuable. And a way of empowering and engaging the teams as well. There's nothing better from an engagement point of view than just spending time with people.
Yeah, and that's and also the learning that they would get from those elements as well, I guess. But I mean, you talked about nurturing and stakeholders, and again, I think that point, and I've not heard it described like that before, so that's excellent. Thank you. And I think that point it's important because you've said otherwise you can get too far along in the process, and as you've talked to already, then you end up with one team doing one thing and another team and they're not very well aligned at all.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, and it is the job of the transformation leader to catch it, and to bring people back together.
Interesting, thank you. And you've had a broad career. You've covered most elements of the customer journey. So, I mean, do you want to sort of take us through the key elements of your career, and then maybe we can look at things like tips that you would give to someone developing their own CX career, and what you think. Well, we can go on to sort of maybe the commercial side of things as well after.
Yeah, sure. So I talk about my career as a mosaic, a really colourful mosaic. Some people talk about climbing the ladder. I'm not. Mine's this bright, colourful picture. And my teams or people that I've mentored sort of often ask me this question about what got you to where you are, or what advice would you give? There's two things that I sort of always try and call out to them that I've learnt along the way. So I'll just call them first before I sort of talk about maybe the sort of more technical elements of my career. One is that I've learnt along the way that I get a huge amount of energy from people, and that from that interplay of between me and people and teams, you become you develop momentum within that energy exchange, and that's a great place to be. I always want to be an energy giver, but sometimes that can just be a one-way process and people end up burnt out. So throughout my career, I've been really lucky enough to work with some fabulous teams and some fabulous places, and I've really recognized that people are at their best when it's an energy exchange. And that's really important to me. The other thing I've worked out about myself is that I generally had no plan. I worked hard. I really enjoyed the work and the energy exchange, and that I've always done best where there's been a challenge, a puzzle, something to work out, something to fix, a target to hit. And that it's those two things in particular that get me out of bed in the morning, the people, the energy. I have led this colourful career. As you said, I started out in PepsiCo. I then went into national accounts. I ran traditional customer service teams, call centres, repair operations, built direct-to-consumer operations within that background. Really, I'm old enough that I existed as the internet was becoming a thing, and we had to scale D2C, and lots of us were working out, crikey, how do we deliver a parcel to somebody's house, into these global D2C operations that we see in the world today, as well as just doing sort of some really traditional, straightforward transformational and business development roles, which again are harnessing those two things of that customer experience with the transformation. I think is what's given me the most energy along the way and allowed me to transform and pull on my experience. But also just those pure transformation roles, I learned so much about systems, opening new markets, suddenly how you have to delve into SAP and work with legal teams. And so I've always felt that every job that I've done, I've learned something that I've taken into my next role. One of my first jobs when I worked for PepsiCo was with Walker's Crisps up in Newcastle. in the Northeast, which is where I'm from. And it was my job many years ago to drive sales of crisps through the local cash and carries.
Right.
And I did this by building relationships with a database of independent retailers, corner shops. There's not so many of them around today as there were then. And I learnt some really key skills then that I take with me today, about getting to know your customer, what's important to them, understanding the business. I still remember things like going and checking what are the sell-by dates looking like on the produce in the shop, and that would give you an insight into what's the turnover, how much cash have they got available to buy, as well as understanding how to get success from your customer. Are they looking for an easy life, or are they looking to grow revenue so they can open 5 more stores? And those are real principles that I keep with me today. Now, I don't think that job exists today. In this modern world, and if I was advising my teenage children who said I want a commercial career, I'd be telling them to go and understand e-commerce, to understand big data, to understand AI. But I would be doing all of that within a framework of saying, understand your customer, understand what contribution it actually makes to the business and how it helps drive that P&L overall.
Yeah, really, those are really fascinating points. And I know can I just ask you about, you said no plan, but you must have had a plan, or
sorry, don't really say that. Don't tell my children I said that.
So was your plan to sort of, I don't want to put words to you, but you obviously got opportunities because you went on to better, or not necessarily better, but different things, and you were exposed to different elements which gave you the opportunity to have, such as you say, a colourful career, and that mosaic of skills and experience and various sort of cultures or what have you. So what would you say helped you be successful, given that if you didn't have the plan, what were the fundamental things that helped get you the opportunities, would you say then, Caroline?
So I think what motivated me and spurred me on change throughout my career. So when you're a junior account manager, you want to be head of sales. So, and I understood what was going to get me through that process. I got to hit your targets, you've got to build relationships, you've got to build you've got to deliver this year's sales and develop the pipeline for next year's sales as well. That I very much understood that one. And so you've got to do your job, and you've got to be successful within your job. As I then got older and wiser, you might say, that I started, and this is when I made the transition into customer services, I started to think, okay, I understood that I wanted to go and lead a big team, and I wanted to be involved in the future building of the D2C business. And so you start to look around and say, okay, so where are those opportunities? So actually, customer service, this would be great. We've got all these people lead and the job to be done in there. So I was always very much about, where is the job to be done? Where's the next job to be done? And how can you grow within that space? And I was lucky enough to sort of start within the UK and be part of a business that then was looking to scale quite quickly across Europe and EMEA. And my skill set was very transferable within that space. And then you learn in a couple of markets about how to do that and manage the translations and the cross-border and all of those things. And then scaling it becomes really pertinent. Throughout my career, the concept of customer experience has become more clearly defined and more prominent, I think, within the C-suite as well. And so building that knowledge and always referring back into understanding how you're going to add value to the P&L within that space, I think, is what's been key to my journey.
Interesting. And just, I think, because we talked about your commerciality, and I think that's one thing that's lacking in a lot of customer professionals, frankly. You know, a lot of them tend to come up from a contact center, which might be more service focused. And I know I speak to lots of, oh, I don't want to do sales, I'm not interested in being in sales. But I think when you're in sales, to the points that you've made, you do tend to get that commercial grounding, which obviously you've had, and I think that served you really well then when you've moved more into CX. So I guess if someone, let's say there's a customer experience professional watching who hasn't had a foundation in sales or the commercial outcome that you have, and I know you've given some advice already, but what would you, or even in any regard, because you've gone from a job to job, but what advice would you give someone going into a job where they maybe have a skill that's lacking or a knowledge that's lacking? How would you overcome that? How could they overcome that?
I think the first thing I say is that that's what makes the world go round. You know, people trying new things, pushing their own limits, their own boundaries. And if somebody's given you a job, knowing that your skill set isn't 100% right, then they're doing it because they think you bring other things to the table. You bring personal skills, emotional intelligence, organizational, operational excellence, things perhaps that they're looking to bring into their team. So I'd always say go in with confidence. Be open and honest about what you don't know, and listen and learn. And you would be amazed how quickly you can get up to speed. And it's like everything, you know, anything. The first time you do it, it's terrifying. Second time, slightly less so. And by the time you've done it 3 times, you're there in a pro. Be humble, be willing to learn, listen, and people will be incredibly kind.
Yeah, fabulous. It's again, I think we put ourselves under so much pressure to know it all. And I think it was the comedian, the Liverpudlian comedian, I can't remember his name now. Oh, it'll come to me, John Bishop. And he said we're all winging it, really. And we are, aren't we? And I think that's the sort of, you know, when you pull the curtain back, that's where we all are, isn't it, ultimately, until we know what we're doing. Yeah,
very much so. Tell you what, Michelle, something I do in my spare time is that I sing in choirs.
Okay.
And I actually run a small local choir across a number of churches. And that has really taught me one of the sort of the real lessons in life about delivering through others. I cannot sing bass. I really cannot do it for them. I can't sing tenor either. So that absolute, you know, you have to be the leader, show the way, keep them all together, explain how you'd like it done, but you can't do it for them. And ultimately that's what leadership is about. And creating that environment where people can be successful.
Very much so. So, I mean, you've had roles which have been focused heavily on growth, acquisition, loyalty, retention, as well as we've talked about, customer experience. So how do you see that ongoing battle, I guess, between CX, CS, and then cost? What does it take, do you think, to have a customer-centered business?
I love this question. I really do. A couple of introductory thoughts, say, within this space. I think the first thing is that every business has customers. And every business exists to derive value of some description from its customers. That's why it's there. And I think we often forget that. The second thing that I talk about within that ongoing battle with costs, and I think that's been so acutely felt over the last couple of years in particular, is that if you speak to any CTO, marketing director, operational logistics leader, people leader, no matter who it is, they will all say, oh, I could do more if only they'd give me the investment. Okay, so it's not just CX and customer service within that space. In terms of how you create that truly customer-centric business, I do think there's now an overwhelming growing awareness of its importance. whether or not you're in D2C, B2C, or B2B even, the customer is the customer, and there's a real understanding of the need for satisfaction, and that the outputs of satisfaction are loyalty and retained revenue, as well as reputation. I think there's an ongoing battle in that space between CX, the building of the journey, the building of the websites, the stores, the long-term leads, the delivery, everything that builds, the marketing, everything that builds to that transaction. And then what I call traditional customer service, where people go when they need help. When everything in the customer experience goes wrong, customers reach out to customer service. And I think there's still a real friction within that space, if I'm honest. Now, you could argue, well, in theory, if the customer experience works seamlessly, nobody should ever have to call customer services. But we live in the real world, and deliveries are missed, payments fail, bills can't be paid. No matter what it is or what you do, it fails, and people need to reach out. I think more acutely now, more than ever, customer services is the place where businesses fail and reputation is lost. And so therefore, everything that you've built in your CX and all that marvelous investment and positivity can just be wiped out in an instant. And in this complex world, you have to pay attention to the happy paths and the unhappy paths and how you resolve those for your customers. The only way to do that to truly be customer centric is to look at the metrics and sweat the metrics in the C-suite in the same way you would the P&L, in my overriding opinion.
Yeah, that's a point that I totally agree with, and have sort of said and spoken to other leaders who feel similarly. And I think that's one thing that massively is missing, and I think also it's really difficult for CX leaders sometimes, because not all CEOs get it, do they, to that point that you've made?
Yes.
So that they don't give CX or sort of the customer metrics that same level of sort of responsibility or importance. And so therefore the CFO isn't really bothered, the CRO isn't bothered, the CMO isn't that bothered. So it makes the CX leader's job really hard, doesn't it? And then when they're banging the customer drum all the time, everyone's sort of like going, yeah, because they're only talking to the customer metrics, not what you've talked about earlier, aligning it to those business values and sort of the P&L as well. And it can be quite tricky.
One of those real magic moments, I think, that happens in an organization is when the leadership realize how everybody contributes to the CX and the customer services as well within that space, that it's not just the job of the web designers or the IT team, and that you can have the most beautiful website in the world, but if the stock's not in the warehouse or being dispatched from the warehouse at the right time, it's a failure. And it's not a failure in the digital team or the e-commerce teams or the marketing teams. It's a failure in another part of the business. Similarly, if you're not managing payments or your site security well enough, the components that go into it are huge. And the leaders of each part of that journey do sit in the C-suite. And so increasingly, it's not just the job of your commercial officers or if customer officers, if you have one, but it's actually, I think, the job of the chief exec to really hone and drive the right alignment across the journey.
And it might be why, hopefully, I mean, the chief customer officer role, it's still, it grows every year, but it's still that I think there's less than 1,000 still in the UK, whereas in the US, they reckon there's over 90% of businesses that have got that or an equivalent role. And I think if it's got the right mandate with the responsibility and everything, then it's set to do the right things and hopefully achieve those goals, isn't it? But it's getting there, really.
Yeah, very much so. I do think it's starting to change.
Yeah.
I really do. I think social media, huge part to play with this, and how quick people are to respond to the good and the bad. and particularly the bad. Actually, I think that is sadly, that's more of a motivating factor often in the C-suite than the good.
I saw a statistic which you might know, or it'd be interesting if you agree with it. I can't remember the research company. I think it was I'm terrible now because I'm going to mention it and not cite the right place. But they said I think it was 41% of e-commerce traffic or sort of commercial turnover revenue came from only 8% of their customers, which seemed, when you're talking about loyalty and sort of the importance of keeping those customers loyal and coming back, I mean, that is just huge. I think
it's staggering, actually, and the lost effort, the lost value, and if you are paying to, I mean, it's one of those old adage, it's everybody, day one of business school, it costs 6 times as much to acquire a customer as it does to retain them. But so many business just spend money reacquiring the same customers time after time, which is something I think to do with organizational design, how their data is set up internally. Do they actually know who their customers are, as well as an internal attitude towards customer satisfaction and sweating that.
Interesting. So what about the future of aspirational leaders then? What do you think those organizations can do, if they want to attract and retain and see that talent does progress in the coming years? Do you have any thoughts on any changes that organizations should make?
I think increasingly the world is becoming more concerned about purpose. What's the purpose, the goal, the vision of a company? And it's not just what do they do. That's important, obviously, but it's also how they do it. And not every company is going to be about saving the planet or biodiversity, and that's not what makes the world go round. But no matter what you're making or what you're doing and what service you're providing, if you do it in the right way and you seek to do it in a more ethically sustainable way that invests in their people as individuals, lets people come to work as their authentic self, no matter what that might be, then I think you're sort of at least you're going to be at the starting line of how to grow and retain. I think the days of the sort of the big rallying cries, the big rah rah, let's all get behind this and do aerobics in the foyer before they open the store and things like this. I'm sure that still has its place, but I think the world's becoming more thoughtful and more considered, and they're looking for sort of kindness and compassion as well as that ambition.
Excellent. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, Caroline, before we sort of finish?
No, just to say thank you, Michelle. I think you've got such a lovely series here. I've listened to quite a few of them now, and the opportunity to just really talk about CX, its place in the business, service, and people. What a great way to spend 40 minutes. So thank you very much.
No, thank you. And it's lovely because I'm so lucky that I get to talk to people like you all the time. This is my job, so doing it and learning more from people and having this time and this space to do so, it's not just great for me, but hopefully, as you say, for others as well. I think, again, it's another statistic. I'm rubbish remembering everything, but they were saying that people don't really trust media anymore, but lots of people are turning to podcasts for you know, that truth.
Yeah.
And I myself listen to them a lot, and I really do think that long form interview, rather than this snapshot media we seem to, you know, this headline rich sort of social media and media environment we seem to be living in, you know, it's great to understand and learn from people that have clearly been successful, like your good self. And if we help and inspire one person, then I think that's a fantastic place to be, really. So I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing some of your thoughts. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Michelle.